Wow, this is so exciting and cool because we've only just decided it today, but I want to welcome Julie Dixon to the lockdown sessions. Julie, 13 years heading up learning and development at Epping Forest District Council. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Brad. It's unexpected, but it's lovely.
I know, right?
To be here.
Well, I've said to you that this is like it's like when musicians jam together, right? We don't have a script.
No.
We've got a theme, and we see where that theme takes us.
Okay, cool.
And so my first question that I pose to everybody who joins these podcasts is, what have you learned and observed in yourself, in those around you at work during these lockdown period that you feel is a learning for you?
I think that I always thought of myself as a total extrovert, and I've always had a little bit of an inkling that I'm actually quite introverted, and I've actually enjoyed some of the quiet times, and I think because we are on, we're on Zoom, we're on Teams a lot of the time, I now do crave, more time on my own. I'm so surprised because I thought going into this, I actually would want to be, with more people rather than less.
It's funny, isn't it? Because although we're disconnected, we're actually more connected digitally, which requires, if not more energy than sitting in a meeting or having a chat in the office corridor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe it's about we're all really ambiverts. We're a little bit of both, and this has given us the chance to enjoy it from an introvert's perspective.
Yeah. It's very interesting because in talking to there's been a couple of people that have said to me that they've loved being in lockdown. Absolutely loved it. But they do seem to be perhaps the more on the kind of introverted preference. And they absolutely seem to have excelled, and kind of got lots of energy from it. Whereas the people who I would say probably are on the extroverted side seem quite sort of flat, I think. It's interesting.
I hear you. I know that when I think of my mum, who's a natural extrovert, needs her family and friends around her. She's out and busy all day long. She's been shielding with my dad since March the 4th. My dad, like me, has been physically distancing for many years, so it's not a big deal for him.
Sounds like my mum.
But my mum hates it. She misses that connection, hugging people. I wonder when you look at, because you also deal a lot with apprentices and you help them grow into like work organisations, so you have to care for them, their well-being. What have you noticed with them? Because at that age group, there's a big talk of the risk attached to young people being in lockdown right now. Have you seen anything specific with them?
It's been very challenging for them because when we took this cohort on, because we take a cohort in every 2 years, a large cohort of about 10, and their age group is 16 to 18, and they're all from the local community. They are normally put into 6 monthly work placements, and they're really part of a team. So they don't work from home at all, and they're very involved with learning everything that goes on with that team. They're actually given a real job, a real role to play. They spend time with really good managers. They have a coach, and obviously we suddenly went from all of that to, within days they were all told, nope, you're working from home now.
Right. How do they cope with
that? I think it's been quite tough. I think for some of them it's been really upsetting. because I think they've seen things with their parents, you know, parents worrying about, you know, the financial, you know, side. They've experienced their parents perhaps being at home with them on furlough, so working from shared space, not easy. And I think we did a lot of support initially, which was probably about them being anxious about the future and what's going to happen. And we were sort of, let's take each day as it comes. We've still got a job to do. They've had huge amount of support, and that's really been around, I think, keeping the communication going. So we make sure their managers are contacting them at least once a week, that they're involved in team meetings. We've kept the contact going with their virtual coaches. Maggie, who works for me, does a weekly meeting with them.
Love that.
Yeah, and we asked them a couple of weeks ago to do a presentation to us about what do you think would help make a better virtual apprenticeship at the moment. And they said things were pretty good, but they would like some more training. So they'd like to get together and do some virtual training. And I know you're helping us with that, Brad, aren't you?
I was going to say, I know a very good training company if you need some.
It's okay, they were top of my list.
But
I think what you're going to do with them is going to be brilliant. You know, getting them interacting virtually is going to be fantastic.
Well, and we've talked about that today, haven't we? That kind of the concept of tapping into motivation. And I wonder, you know, when you look across, you know, you sit within HR, so you have quite a privileged position. I've been joking and saying, you know, for the first time in 25 years of doing this work, HR has suddenly become one of the most pivotal points of all businesses. It's actually a critical part of the business, and everyone wants a piece of HR right now. Are you feeling that kind of push and pull, that suddenly HR is in demand much more than it has been?
I think in Epping, there's been a recognition of the work of HR going from being what we'd call transactional to transformational.
Yeah.
So HR was always the place where, you know, people would turn up and say, you know, is this the wages department? And HR used to do things like look after the lease cars, and people would turn up if they had a flat tire and things. And like, it
the
really
old
was
style
like
personnel.
that, you know, 10 years ago. The old style personnel, And I think slowly with some of the changes that we've been making internally, just, you know, changing the name of the team, changing the roles, changing the structure, it's been about educating the business as to you know, HR should be absolutely enabling the transformation and should be at the top table, and, you know, helping to, you know, especially post-COVID, you know, looking at the strategy for the organisation to recover, and helping in terms of, you know, getting your people on side. We've done a really big, we did a wellbeing survey in May, and we had a huge response to that. We had over half the organisation respond, and I think people have really sort of come alive, you know, to the fact that an organisation like EFDC is, you know, it's there for the community, and everyone felt that sense of purpose. And I think that our leaders need to really tap into that, because they'll get the performance and they'll get the drive from our people if they can tap into that sense of purpose. So, you know, a lot of our work is trying to get senior leadership to connect those dots.
Right. And that probably extends even beyond the officers, but even to members as well, right, in their leadership capacity, because it is a community when you work as a district council. It is, and I noticed when COVID kicked off, I live in a village, very rural, and actually the sense of community was really strong. I'm not very active on Facebook, but I put a note out in my village network to say, you know, if anybody is feeling low or with mental health being challenged, I'd be really happy to give, just completely free of charge, no obligation, just a coaching or a psychotherapy session. Well, for some, I'm really the only 3 people who respond on my Facebook when I do post something is normally my mum, my brother, and my sister. And here there were 222 likes, 87 comments, and that sense of community where, when the village shop says we'll do deliveries, you've got 50 people saying just get in touch if you need someone to drive deliveries out there. That sense of community. I wonder though, when we move into, you mentioned before, this recovery, whether now we're starting to come back a little bit more selfishly, we're thinking of ourselves, and young people are not deemed to be great at the physical distancing because they're not so much at risk. You guys are actually going to remain virtual, aren't you, for quite a while? So you've got to sustain this sense of community. How are you going to sustain that level of motivation and drive for people? Because it's hard 6 months away from the office.
Yeah, I think that for EFDC, the whole wellbeing agenda is really, really important. So we had that in our people strategy, but we brought it all forward with COVID and lockdown. So there's been a huge amount of support that's gone into that. And that's the normal stuff that you might see around counselling and coaching, and also things around us having mental health first aiders. But there's lots of other stuff that's gone into that, just things to keep people connected. So we've got sort of virtual quiz nights. We've got we're looking at a virtual murder mystery and a virtual escape room.
Oh, they're cool. Those games are cool.
Yeah, we've been doing the quizzes, and we're gonna try some other stuff out. And we do something called I think some other organisations are doing this sort of thing, but we do it regularly. We were doing it 3 times a week. We're still doing it twice a week. Virtual coffee hours where people can just drop in from all of the organisation. There's no agenda. We just talk about whatever people want to talk about. They can just come. They can let off a bit of steam, or they can, kind of whatever's on their mind. Sometimes we talk about books. Sometimes we talk about box sets. Sometimes we talk about just generally how people are finding it. We've had really great feedback on that. People just saying that that's nice to know that's available. So I think that runs alongside all of the stuff that we're doing with our our management development as well, because I think the role of the manager in all this, Brad, is really important, that they're checking in with their people. They know their people best, and they should know when someone's perhaps struggling a bit. So the management development side that we're looking at as well at the moment is really important.
I suppose when I hear that, the first thing that comes to my mind is, some people will be feeling vulnerable. And I wonder, do managers feel comfortable that they've got those skill sets to have those conversations where maybe somebody's mental health is challenged, or maybe they are really struggling with being at home? Because that's quite an unsafe place, isn't it? We talk about psychological safety now. How are you finding when you're talking to the managers? Do they feel prepared? Do they feel okay with those kind of chats? Because that's a biggie for me, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a mix. In an organisation of our size, I think some people are very comfortable with it, and others not so. But I mean, we've just invested in some mental health first aid awareness aimed at our managers. And I have to say, it's a brilliant piece of e-learning. It's really interactive, which e-learning isn't always, is it?
No,
but this
agreed.
is great, fantastic. And what I really liked about it was it focused on having conversations and noticing, your member of staff, physically, emotionally, and behaviourally, whether they're acting slightly, out of character.
Right.
And how do you then sort of start a conversation about that? And this learning is not about diagnosing somebody. because that's not what we're there to do as managers. It's more about noticing and listening, asking the right questions, and then, you know, maybe that's enough, and if not, you know, being able to signpost to some other support. So yeah, we're doing a huge kind of piece of work around that. I can't see that that's going to go away in the future. No. I think that's only going to need more support in the future. And we've got, I mean, our chief exec Georgina is really committed to that in terms of us supporting the organisation with our wellbeing strategies. So that's, you know, that is really, really positive, I think, for us at the moment.
You know, Julie, when you say that, it's like, you know, really music to my ears, because I think people will remember how their organisations treat them in this moment.
Yeah.
I have a friend.
Right, Brad.
I have a friend in Ibiza, and he works in a high-end luxury restaurant come club, and he's the sommelier. So his job is to buy the finest wines and to serve them up to people. And they've been treated very poorly over this lockdown.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and you know, 2/3 of the staff just cut, nothing, no pay, just cut, go home, we don't need you this summer. And the 1/3 that are staying,
right,
we're not going to pay you more, but you are going to have to cover this summer's, you know, tariffs. So,
yeah.
you know, just get on with it. Be grateful you've got a job, was the line. And,
yeah.
you know, he was saying, I've been doing sommeliering. I don't know if that's a word, but he's been doing sommeliering for 30 years. And he's now reevaluating whether he even wants to stay with this organisation beyond the summer. He won't let them down. He wouldn't leave.
No.
But he doesn't know if he'll want to stay with them beyond the summer because of the way they treat it. And I think when you describe your coffee mornings, your management check-ins, your well-being learning, already there you've given 3 very critical things that you're doing as an organisation to look after your people.
Yeah.
Does that satisfy you? Do you think there's more to be done?
I think there's always more to be done.
Right.
I think that what we're looking at the moment is we're looking at all of our onboarding and induction, because Epping's gone through a huge amount of change at the over the last couple of years, like a lot of organisations and local authorities, public sector. And also, if you add to that how we're working virtually at the moment, so we just launched yesterday a guide to how to recruit virtually, and that's a guide for managers and for the candidates as well.
Oh, wow.
So that's been a really good piece of work. But yeah, we're just looking at recruitment and onboarding, and how we can make that a better experience for people, because there's definitely some you know, people at the moment, I think, get a good experience if they've got a good manager. So there's things that we need to do to get the consistency.
It's as if when you're talking, you guys have recognised quite quickly how you've had to shift to be able to take people with you. And it sounds as if you're shifting quite organically, quite naturally, with direction. Where have the challenges been? Like, because it can't all be positive, or maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe I'm underestimating your positivity. But has it? You know, it sounds so positive. Have you noticed challenges that you're thinking, wow, actually that's quite tough? I mean, I hear you say onboarding virtually, and I'm like, that's a tough gig, right?
Yeah. I think it's tough to get some people thinking differently. So I think when people have done things the same way for a long time, and in local government we have been quite, you know, very process driven, and and, you know, making sure we tick the right boxes. And sometimes when you have a huge amount of change, you have to start thinking differently, and you have to be quite creative, and you have to look outside of, you know, local government to see what other organisations might be doing, or, you know, just trying out some different things, really. And I think the whole thing about asking people, like we did with our wellbeing survey, it's just asking people how they feel and how they are. It just goes a long way to getting people on side. I think people are sensible, they're adults, they know that you can't give them everything that they want, but I think if you can go some way to understanding what they might be dealing with at the moment, and whether that's, you know, making sure they're able to get a chair that suits them at home, right, or they need some more IT training, or they just want somebody to talk to. I think that whole thing about the staff engagement, I think it's changed a lot of people's thoughts about staff engagement. I think that was perhaps previously seen as a bit of a tick box, right, rather than something that can enable an organisation to become a high performing organisation. So those links, I think, have been a challenge in the past, and people would put some of that stuff in a box and label it pink and fluffy.
Yeah, no, they would. They absolutely would.
Rather than linked to performance.
Right, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've worked together for like 4 years plus now.
Yeah.
And so I know intimately some of the workings and the changes that the organisation's been through. And
yeah,
there have been moments in time when the people have felt, wow, a little change weary, another change coming, here's another org restructure, we've got to do this psychometric and that kind of assessment and reapply for jobs, you know, the whole shebang in the public sector of late in the last few years. It seems as though, from what you're saying, this may be a real positive to come out of COVID, is actually the attitude of staff is changing towards the business, because maybe it's not so bad. The business cares about us, it trains us, it looks out for us, it, you know?
Yeah.
It's a positive. I love that.
We've seen a lot of those types of comments coming out of our survey, that people have said, oh, I'm really proud to work for an organisation that cares about us and actually, you know, supports the community. And it's really, really interesting how COVID has kind of, you know, and I guess our response to COVID and supporting the staff as well as the community has really changed the kind of the feel in a very short space of time, you know, under 6 months, that's quite amazing, really.
Well, and especially since so much of what you do from a frontline services perspective requires a lot of people to still be working. There'll be a lot of key workers who work in local authority.
Absolutely, yeah. And interestingly enough, I was talking to the service manager for council tax and benefits, and he was saying today, you know, they've had a huge challenge to get all the grant money out to small businesses.
Right, yeah, and I'm sure I know enough who are applying.
Yeah. And he was saying that, you know, EFDC are at the top of the table for getting that money out. I think out of 52 councils, you know, they've worked absolutely flat out to get, you know, it's something like 30 million that they've got out to small businesses. So, and they continue to get, you know, the obviously there's been new initiatives coming along with new pots of money, and they continue to strive to get this money out to the, you know, the businesses that need it. So I think our people have been amazing. I think they've absolutely done what you know, kind of, they've just gone over and above what we would expect them to in terms of supporting the community. So it's good. Yeah, it's really good to see that.
I sense the public forget when they look at local authorities that you serve a higher purpose, which is the community. They see that you do a job, but they don't necessarily get all those frontline services.
No.
Those people who are running the library and the museum who've been furloughed, the guys who are refuse collectors who are having to go out every day in their groups, in their cars, out to people's houses, picking up their bins. You know, there's, and that's just two parts of the organisation. Before you talk about benefits or out in the community with old people or learning and special needs. I suppose that maybe this has given an opportunity for local authority to create a kind of new brand about itself, to remind people of the good that you do. Are you proud of what you see your team doing in your part of the organisation?
Oh God, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because we're quite a small team. I think there's 11 of us, and I think the feedback that we've had recently on the support that we're giving the staff and the managers has been fantastic. And also some of our team, we offered up some of our team to go and support on the it was called Project Shield. So making telephone calls out to vulnerable people, making sure people could, get the food that they needed. So we gave up that sounds terrible, doesn't it? But we had probably 2/3 of our team were out doing that for probably a good 2 months to support the organisation. And that, that's people showing their flexibility, really, because they're just, they just said, that's fine, I can do that. I'll go and do that. I'll go and do that at the weekend. And, we were really proud of our team for, just being flexible and, getting on with it,
And also giving of themselves, because they're putting themselves out there in risk. I know that, you know Adele as well, who works with me, and she was, out there driving meals around to people's houses and, knocking on the door and screaming through the letterbox, your food's here, I'm not staying, and running back to her car so they could come and open the door. And, I think part of that, it goes back to what you said right at the beginning. Maybe we've actually come full circle, because when we started, you talked about how it gave an opportunity for the organisation to, build a community feel. And that was kind of like on a macro level. And on a micro level, your team, 2/3 of them have been going out into the community. I love the idea of how you're supporting people, giving them this space that they need. And long may that continue, because we're going to be in this recovery phase, I sense, probably until we move into the new year. And you guys,
right.
When you come back, at least you'll have a nice new clean building, because you would have had your renovations done and you won't need to.
And we're talking about having a wellbeing area, a reflective area within that. So we've had some, that building is going to be designed for people to be able to collaborate together. And we're talking about that now as well. So it's very interesting how COVID has, it's just going to have this, massive impact on the future, and hopefully some of it positive.
Have you considered having like a sensory soft playroom?
We've got one of those.
For people to go and chill out when they're feeling a little bit stressed.
This is kind of what we're looking at, really, as much as we can do something like that.
I think I'll be coming.
Just somewhere people can
chill.
Somewhere people, we've got to make the most of the space and make sure we can get multi-use out of it. But as much as possible, we're gonna, that's what we want to have that there for people, so that people know we're the sort of organisation that, we take mental health and well-being, seriously. I think in terms of recruiting people, that's what people are going to be looking for. I think that's a real attraction. Yes, they are now. Yeah,
I think anyone listening to this episode will see how Epping Forest District Council have been doing that. I think, Julie, what we need to do is come back in February time, when you guys are back in the office, and do another episode and see what the recovery phase was like and how it's been getting people back into the office. Will you come back in 4 months' time, 5 months' time? Brilliant.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Thanks,
Julie
Brad.
Dixon, thank you very much. I'm going to push stop recording and publish the podcast.
Thank you.